Hello, welcome to the British Food History Podcast. I am your host, Neil Buttery, food historian and chef. My guest today is Paul Crane, specialist in European ceramics, especially Worcester porcelain. Indeed, he is a direct descendant of Dr. Wall, the founder of Worcester Porcelain. And you may or may not know that I've been working closely with the Museum of Royal Worcester for a couple of years now, and it was great to walk around the museum with such a knowledgeable man as Paul. And it's very important. You might not have thought about porcelain much before, but if we're going to understand British food history, we need to know about the dining, the food, the trappings, and the behaviour surrounding meals and meal times. Three things that are constantly interacting and informing each other. Before I go on, remember you can still get a 25% discount off the ticket price at the Servit Forth Food History Festival on the 18th of October, which is online. There's a link in the show notes to find the Eventbrite page and the website. But the important thing to remember is use the code SERVE25. SERVE is all caps and it's the digits 25. Use that at the checkout. Season 9 of the podcast is sponsored by Fruit Pig, Britain's last remaining commercial craft producer of fresh blood black puddings. Fruit Pig, also known as Matthew Cockin and Grant Harper, put a huge amount of care and attention into harvesting fresh blood to create a very delicious black pudding. They also make a gluten-free black pudding and a decadent hog's pudding and traditional haggis, and they are excellent makers of bacon. Visit fruitpig.co.uk for more details of their products and journey, and to find your local stockist. You can also access their shop, and Grant and Matthew have very kindly given listeners to the British Food History Podcast a unique special offer. 10% off your order until the end of October 2025. Use the offer code FOODHIS at the checkout. FOODHIS is all one word, FOODHIS, capital F. Please support them if you can. Okay, back to today. Yes, I am talking with ceramics expert Paul Crane about the early years of Worcester porcelain. Paul is a consultant at the Brian Haughton Gallery, St James's, London, and a specialist in ceramics from the medieval and Renaissance periods through to the 18th and 19th centuries. He presently sits as a trustee of the Museum of Royal Worcester and is also a fellow of the Society of Antiquaries. He's an independent historian and researcher and liveryman of the Worshipful company of art scholars. So there's really no one better to talk about this very interesting topic with. Our conversation was recorded in person at the Museum of Royal Worcester, so you can hear the noises and sounds of the building as we walk and talk. I hope it makes it a most immersive listen. Now, this is very important. If you want to see the pieces we discuss and make things even more immersive, you should do one of two things. Go to the website, where I've added images of the majority of the items discussed in today's episode in the accompanying blog post. Or go to the YouTube channel, where I've lined up the images with our discussion. Paul and I really do our best to describe the pieces, but of course it's best if you can see them for yourself. And hopefully, if you can, after listening, you might pop to the Museum of Royal Worcester itself. We talk about Dr. Wall and how he got the Worcester manufactory up and running, the importance of seeing porcelain by candlelight, asparagus servers, the first piece of porcelain you see when you walk into the museum, and the wonderful Royal Lily service and how Worcester porcelain attained its royal warrant, amongst many other things. Those listening to the Secret Podcast can hear more about the early blue and white pieces, including a rare bleeding bowl, the first commemorative coronation porcelain cup, well, tankard really, and the stunning Nelson tea service, plus much more. As usual, I will be back at the end, but now please enjoy Worcester Porcelain with Paul Crane. Welcome to the British Food History Podcast. Paul, it's very nice to meet you.
Thank you very much, Neil. I'm very privileged to have been asked to come and speak to you on this. I came to this subject when I was a very young boy, My grandfather collected first period Dr. Wall porcelain, and I used to marvel at it in one of the great cabinets there at my old home. He used to sit me on his knee in the evenings, and he would show me these green books. He called them green books, you see. And I knew much later on in the years of my career that actually those were Sotheby's catalogues and those were their colours. But he would get me to point at things, usually some of the things that he was going to be very interested in. And then several weeks later, as if by magic, they would appear in the cabinet. And I really thought it was magic. And it set me off on my career. Long after he died in my teens, that I came to fully understand why he was interested in porcelain. And that is to do with our family, because we descend from Dr. Wall himself. So he's my 8th great-grandfather. If you like, with slip in the blood, there was little doubt that I would want to try and make this one of my chief interests. And then about 10 years ago, the board asked me to come and join them here and sit as a trustee with many of my friends who have sat in those august positions. So there we are.
We go back to 1750. What informed Dr. Wall in the first place?
He had a very, very important link pin in all of this, and that is his friend William Davis, who was the chemist. And Dr. Wall's mind, very entrepreneurial, he would have seen what was going on in terms of porcelain in other parts of the United Kingdom at that point. And he would have seen some successes. Now, we don't know all of the discussions that they had, but Dr. Wall knew society quite well in this part of the world. Yes. Davis knew his ingredients for things. And just at the end of Bridge Street on Broad Street, I mean, you can walk up there now. It's only a stone's throw from here. That's where Davis lived, and that's where the chemist was. And there were experiments that the two did in the garden behind or in the yards behind. Right. Those objects they still exist. They are seriously rare. They're slightly underfired. They're yellow to the look of them. They look very sort of biscuity, if you like. And they're prone to crazing as well, so there were problems there. But essentially, they were making objects in a very, very small concern in order to further that by the progress of financial backing into what they hoped would be a manufactory. There are very few examples of the Broad Street manufacture, and that generally is dated to about sort of 1749, 50. But what did come out of that was the fact that it did interest some of his backers, and therefore he was able in 1751 to persuade another 13 people, and we count Dr. Wall and William Davis as 2. So there's 15 original partners in this. And in 1751, they signed the deed of partnership. In 1752, actually, in some terms, quite lucky, the Lunds Bristol manufactory in Bristol at Redcliffe Back, under Benjamin Lund and Philip Miller, it was going down. They were going to get into bankruptcy area. Lund had come from Limehouse in London. He'd been through that period of evolution in an early evolutionary manufactory like Limehouse to iron out difficulties when that manufactory failed. Only after 2 years, he went to Bristol and he set up there, and he managed to further the technology in order for his objects not to simply collapse in the kiln. Something that I wanted to say right at the beginning of the manufactory is that there was no colour right at the beginning. It was blue and white, and blue and white is under the glaze. So these objects, for example, they're formed, first of all, and then they're slightly dried to the cheese or leather hard stage. And then they are sent to the biscuit kilns to be fired so that they will not go back into wet clay. Mm-hmm. They are then painted with a cobalt suspension. And you can see on some of these wonderful things here in the museum, particularly that plate there, which...
the one at the back there with the tree.
That's right, the garlanded breadfruit tree it is on Tenyon Island. And it shows a very, very rare pattern called the Valentine pattern. It's copied from a Chinese export pattern that was developed by Lieutenant Percy Brett. He went with Commodore Anson on his voyage around the world in the 1740s. And it was a pattern that he asked the Chinese to place on a service, which you can now see at Shuckburgh, which is the home of the Earls of Lichfield and where the Anson family came from. But what I wanted you to notice was this wonderful sort of array of different shades of the blue.
Yes, in the background it almost looks like it's been used as a watercolour.
As a wash, exactly that, exactly that. Now, the person that painted that, I would say, was somebody who had cut their teeth in Bristol painting on tin glaze or Bristol Delft ware, because the tin glaze body on pottery produces almost like painting on blotting paper. You have to be very quick, so washes work wonderfully. That move over to porcelain that occurred in Bristol, the Delft industry carried on, but of course the new novel material of porcelain was catching people's eyes. So who better than to paint it than the Delft ware enamelers? But they had a problem at Lunds, Bristol. They didn't understand how to keep the blue from smudging. Once it had been painted on, they then dipped it in glaze, fired it, and it started to run.
I see.
So what Dr. Wall did up here, and William Davis, I'm sure, was very key into this, was that they introduced a firing after having painted the cobalt blue on. That burnt the cobalt on and it stopped it from running. They were very lucky in the way that the Lunds Bristol traditions and the technology around that had allowed the porcelain to be made much more perfectly. They were very lucky with all of that, but they added to that immediately in 1752 when the stock, the trade, the modelers, the objects and the enamelers came up the River Severn to Warmstry House, where the factory was located at that stage. They had to establish the silver taste, shape and form here. It was very important for them to do that. If you don't do that at this period of time, you do not capture the eyes of those that can afford to buy it.
What's silver taste?
Well, the silver taste and style, shape and form is exactly that. So, for example, objects like the helmet-shaped jug there, you see its inspiration is a silver piece. And in fact, it goes beyond that because the inspiration for that piece comes from antiquity. It's like an upturned Athenian helmet, for example, the conceit of which within silver and in porcelain here is to serve a good wine from it, perhaps a Rhenish or something. If you don't put your objects into the silver form at this stage, people are not going to understand what it is. And you have to capture the eye of the aristocracy, the rich mercantile classes, and then eventually the ruling families, the royal families. So the new and the novel material had to go into the silver shape.
What we must mention is the first thing that you see when you walk into the museum.
Absolutely.
Let's go and do that because it would be remiss.
It would.
If you've never been to the museum before, you walk in, you might be expecting to see, some huge urns or something, but instead you walk in and you see a very, very small cream boat.
Yes.
What's so interesting or important about this one piece?
It is a tremendous piece. It is probably the most important of all of the first period Dr. Wall Worcester that the museum holds. In essence, it is a cream boat. It's made on a hexagonal form. It is moulded in crisp, low relief with a vision of a landscape from China, someone's vision of Cathay there. And it's been painted, the highlights, in marvellous jewel-like colours there, where you can see the Chinaman walking over the bridge underneath the great palms there, going along to a series of Chinese pagodas that are teetering on these wonderful large-scale rocks. perfectly encapsulating that blending of the chinoiserie and the rococo together.
Yes.
On the inside of it, we can see 4 tied precious objects. They're tied with red ribbons, which again furthers the good luck of the piece and the contents within. But underneath the piece, it is moulded in crisp low relief with the Latin name Wigornia, which is the Roman name for Worcester. So this piece shows the excellence of its geographical nature and is a one and only. It came to light in the great collection of the MacGregor Stewarts in Nova Scotia, Halifax, Nova Scotia in Canada in 1973. And it made a world record price when it came up at Sotheby's. The museum was able to buy it with a lot of raised money from the Victoria and Albert Museum, and we were able to buy it. And we can see it here next door to an engraving of the porcelain manufactory. Now, that is a very important piece in itself. It comes from an edition in August 1752. And it comes from the Gentleman's Magazine. It is the very, very first advertisement for the production of porcelain in Worcester. And Dr. Wall, again, very, very clever man, one of the original of the 15 partners was a man called Edward Cave. Now, he owned the Gentleman's Magazine, and he went under the pseudonym of Sylvanus Urban. And he talked about the plans for the porcelain manufactory. Well, he was one of the partners. And that is the very, very first appearance of it that we see. We can still see to the side of it St. Andrew's Church there with the famous spire called the Glover's Needle in this city. And then we see Warmstry House, which was made up of a couple of courtyards. It had been the Worcester home of the Warmstry family, and tradition has it that part of their arms was a little crescent moon, and that was the mark that one of the enamellers must have noticed up in the cornice or somewhere like that, or perhaps on the moulded plaster ceilings, and marked it on one of the pieces, perhaps as his own tally mark in the 18th century. But it became the factory's mark. Yeah.
And you've got a little kiln there as well, of course.
Yes, that is the biscuit kiln down there. The biscuit kiln. Yeah, that's where they fired to the biscuit. And you can see the river there at the bottom of it as well. I mean, the River Severn was known as the artery of England. Anything could come up, manufactured, it'd go back down again. And in fact, there was a man called Angerstein in the mid-1750s, and he was sent from the Kingdom of Sweden to find out why there was a lot of iron ore being shipped into the UK. Well, he came over and he looked pretty much a lot of cities, and he even came to Worcester to find out what was going on. He was a spy. And he tried to get into the factory because, of course, everything was closely guarded secret. The recipe was known by only a few people, and those people had to be together when things were mixed. No one knew the whole story. But Angerstein tried to get in. He was politely told to leave. He tried again, and he was fairly firmly told to go to the door again. He tried a third time, and this time they didn't like it, and he left a bit battered and bruised.
Right.
He didn't go back to the factory again.
3 strikes and you're out.
That's it. There's one more thing here that I wanted to point out. It's this sauce boat here. They're termed as pedestal sauce boats for obvious reasons. But do you notice that the glaze there is rather grey?
I do.
Well, it's specifically done. Normally, pieces at that particular date tend to have little incised lines on them or scratch marks on them. We actually refer to that type of body as scratch cross class.
Okay.
We know it's dated to 1754 because there are a series of mugs that are dated. They have a pattern which is the bird and the snail, which appears on a guglet there. You see, the porcelain was constantly evolving in terms of the paste. But what he's trying to do here is to just hang on to that silver shape a little bit more.
Yes, you can see it, yes, for sure.
He's doing that in the shape and form, as we can see. He's done it also in the colouring. He's blued the glaze. But what he has also done here is, this is the advent of the invention of transfer printing.
Yes.
And the earliest of the transfer prints, which we see here, a little squirrel in a cartouche with flowers on either side of the scrolling, is what's known as what we would say as a smoky primitive. Now, it is meant to look like engraving. So he's produced an object of silver shape. He's blued the glaze to look like silver.
Yeah.
And he's also put some a transfer print on to look like it's been engraved. And if you put candlelight to that in the evening, it's got the most wonderful silver quality about it visually.
It's nice. Also nice to see it in situ, how it would have been viewed by people around the table.
Very much so.
It's easy to forget that these things were used.
Totally. Absolutely.
Was it a big risk for Dr. Watt? He's obviously a very charismatic chap. He's just talked to 13 other people.
Yes, he had the gift of the gab, all
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, a polymath who seems to have been personable. There's not many of those around.
No,
They're always
no.
horrific people. You think like Isaac Newton. He's a polymath who actually seems to be a nice, approachable chap.
Yes.
So he's got all these people on board.
Yeah.
But essentially, they hadn't worked everything out.
No, it's a
They
huge
were far
risk.
from it.
Yeah.
It must have been, how did he talk those people into it, do you think?
Well, it's a huge risk. Limehouse, that failed in 1748. Lunds Bristol, it only went on for 2 years in Bristol. The European porcelain manufacturers were backed and heavily and reassuringly by their monarchs. Not the case here.
here.
And it could have gone very, very bad, and they could have lost the lot.
Right, because people talk, of course, about Royal Worcester, but at this point, there's no seal.
No,
on there.
there's
We're quite
no
away
seal
from
of
that.
approval yet.
Yeah.
But it's coming.
One thing that I'd like to point out, actually, let's go over to the display, because one of the things, when I was creating this display with the piece of Dr. Wall's dinner.
Well, you've done wonderful things
Well,
here.
thank you. We worked hard on it, but it was such a fun project. But one of the things that really leapt out to me, and there's lots of other examples, but we've got here an asparagus server.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. They made a lot of those.
We can understand people need things to drink out of.
Yes.
And to eat their dinner from.
Yeah.
And things like that.
Yeah.
Jugs for sauces and cream and things like that. But there's a certain number of things, like asparagus servers. Like over in the dessert cabinet there, we've got a grape cart.
Yes.
Where you pop your grapes in and wheel the grapes.
Perfect novelty for people on the dining table.
Yes, no one needs these things,
They
technically.
don't. No, but it's theatre.
Yes. One of the things, so my background's actually evolutionary biology. So quite often I think of these things from an anthropological point of view.
Yes.
And like a peacock, it's a huge handicap to have all this peacockery on it, but it manages to still strut around and look fantastic and keep itself clean.
And doesn't it look marvellous when it does?
Exactly. And I'm just wondering that this must be exactly the same thing. No one needs this thing, but we do have it.
Yes.
And it just seems, that aspect of it seems really like pure
that's
showing off, essentially.
It is, and it's Dr. Wall with that entrepreneurial spirit that he had in making these things that actually couldn't really be bought anywhere else. Pickle leaves are another thing. Chinese didn't make them. They didn't make asparagus servers. They probably didn't know what asparagus was.
No, indeed.
So there was a huge hole in the market that needed to be filled. So you do see these being made at Worcester quite a lot. The other factories followed, Carfleet, Derby, for example. But it happens here first, and that's the important thing.
It was just so much fun going through
you've
all
made
the trays of things.
You've made it come alive, and I can only imagine your visits here to the storerooms and choosing object after object. It must have been a bit like Christmas.
It was, yes. And as I was saying before we started recording, it's kind of got me hooked now.
Good. This is very good. What you've created, of course, allows the general public who come in here to fully connect with their imagination, but also from historical source books to learn and understand how a Georgian dinner took place.
Stressful is my key word.
I always encouraged collectors that I had a lot to do with, and still have a lot to do with, to view their objects, whether it be glass, silver or porcelain, at night. Get the candle around it, it sparkles, it produces such a beguiling play of light to it that once you do that, you'll be doing it again and you'll love it all the more if that's in any way possible.
Are you using your porcelain?
I do.
Are you serving up your soft scoop, Neapolitan soft scoop in an ice pail or anything?
I've always wanted to do that. We talked about our mutual friend Ivan Day, and I remember him describing and showing me how that was done on at one stage. It was the Georgian equivalent of the refrigerator, wasn't it, and the freezer.
Those ice pails
Magic.
are an amazing piece of engineering.
Yeah, they have to be so strong.
Oh, well, first of all, the fact that any of them exist without pieces falling off and that the bowls... Let's have a look at this one. In fact, Ivan got very excited about these ones because the inside bowl is decorated.
Yes.
Which he didn't think ever actually happened, because he assumed, you don't need to decorate that because no one's going to see it. The butler's going to be spooning this stuff out. So either it's one of those things where people just know, I want it to be decorated just so it's complete.
An extra part of
is it because they're actually...
Could be
serving themselves,
because it was such a delicacy, wasn't it? Then to be able to produce something like that. They also had to have different uses. So if you do take the top and the liner out of that, you can use it to display flowers in as well. Some of them you can take off a top and then have single open roses on the surface. So they had to be so versatile as to produce what they wanted to, and you know all about that. But they also had to look very decorative in some cases as well.
Well, he doesn't run them now. But Ivan ran a historic ices course.
Oh, that would have been wonderful.
So we made some tamarind ice cream.
Did you?
Using the spaddle.
Is that the sort of thing that flattens, or because it sticks to that?
Yeah, essentially, it's a pewter torpedo sat in a bucket.
Yes.
And in the gap there's salt and ice. It drops the temperature down, adding the salt.
Yes.
And really it's essential of getting it's a spatula, great big spatula, and you're just scraping down the side, spinning it round, and you get unbelievable ice cream. Very quickly.
And the feel of the cold coming off it must be quite tangible as well.
Well, indeed.
Yeah.
But because Ivan likes to use his porcelain, he seems to be fearless with these expensive things. But he said, yes, let's have a go. And we put the freshly made, really soft scoop tamarind ice cream in there, and it kept perfect. It didn't freeze more. It didn't melt. 2 hours.
Good grief, really. Yeah, it just shows you, doesn't it? 2
they
hours.
know what they're doing.
Yeah, amazing.
Gobsmacking, really. I think that's when the penny started to drop, to be honest, Paul. I was like, okay,
You've got
there's a lot more to this than meets the eye. Well, before we leave this first few years, we've got this case here.
Oh, yes. Yes, this gave me a lot of joy to put together.
I bet it did.
They asked me to curate a case, as they did with John Sandon as well, and his is over there. Mine, I wanted to concentrate on the Giles Atelier. We were very, very fortunate in 1992 to be bequeathed here at the museum the Gerald Cook collection, which was one of the finest collections of first period Dr. Wall Worcester porcelain decorated in the London atelier of James Giles. As you can see, there's quite a difference in terms of the decoration on these wares that are decorated in London by James Giles and his workshop. They altogether a little looser, naturalistic is the key word and element. And we also find that there are birds and animals that are depicted on them. For example, the wonderful pair of tomato red ground hexagonal vases and covers here. The inspiration of those is from an Enlightenment publication that was produced by George Edwards, who was the pupil of Hans Sloane, the great naturalist.
Yes.
And he produced, with Sloane's backing, a series of 4 volumes, The Natural History of Uncommon Birds, first of all in 1743, 1747, 50 and 51. Many of the birds that we see here are from the first and the second volume. You've got the long-tailed red-breasted finch there that was actually owned. I mean, he went to see that bird live in order to sketch it for his work. It belonged to a man called Mr. Hatton of Lawrence Street, which was just near to the Chelsea manufactory. Naturalistic elements provided in that source book provided the inspiration for a huge amount of decoration of the contemporary porcelain manufacturers that were going on then. We find it at Worcester through the Giles Atelier, but we also find it at Chelsea as well. The items here generally go together in terms of the aspect of decoration. So you have naturalistic flowers, these little stringy branches, as John Mallet, the great porcelain curator of the Victoria and Albert Museum in the 70s and 80s, describes it here. And in fact, that teapot comes from Charles William Dyson Perrin's collection. So that was here before the Gerald Cook things arrived in 1992. But you can see a great flamboyant array of jewel-like quality and a very, very heavy use of gold in some of these borders.
Yes.
And they described it as a heavy pennyweight because that's how they measured the gold that was going to be put on.
It really shows what people were interested in at the time.
It does. Nature and enlightenment. The exploration that was funded by aristocrats of the day and the aristocracy who had bought some of these great source books were very interested in nature, exploration and variety. And so we're able to specially commission services to show this and have around their tables or their pavilions outside with these nature's array of birds, beasts and animals. And these are all single services. These are not made in any number at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that there's things like you got what looks like maybe a green woodpecker.
That's
here.
quite correct. Yes.
Some kind of maybe
yes,
paradise.
It is a bird of paradise. You're quite right. That's from volume 1 of George Edwards's book, and then we've got.
Well, that's it. So almost standing out
Yes.
from the rest because is a good old bustard, which I think have just been reintroduced to England, haven't they?
Yes, on Salisbury Plain, I think, as well. And there it is, in its natural habitat.
There it is, with
Stonehenge.
I've not noticed that
Absolutely.
until just now.
Well, again, it's from George Edwards, and that piece is from Gerald Cook's collection. And you're absolutely right, shows the great bustard there. Edwards, on one side of the book, depicts the bird, and on the other, he tells us all about it and where he found it. And in that instance, can you believe it? He bought one that had been shot, and it had been degutted, etc. And he bought it from near Southwark Cathedral at London Bridge, and ate it with a friend.
Ah, that's
not
nice.
something that would happen today.
Well, no, I was going to say there was couple of 100 years, people like to have multi-bird roasts, birds within birds.
I've always been fascinated by that.
The most birds within birds I've ever found was 17.
And when does that start in terms of the date?
Good question. Good question. Well, it's in full swing in the 18th century for sure.
Already there?
Yes.
Gosh.
The 17 bird roast was
amazing.
18th century, and the biggest of the birds was, of course,
was the bustard. Extraordinary.
Yes, it's absolutely amazing stuff.
Yeah.
Well, the skills people had to have in the kitchen, the skills people had to have in factories. There's no digital dials telling you anything. No. You've got to use tiny cues, extrapolate from them.
Yes.
For anything that involves creating anything, whether it's edible art or whether it's your porcelain, you really appreciate the skill of these people.
Oh, totally. I mean, there were no thermometers, etc. They weren't developed until Wedgwood came along when he was trying to produce the Portland vase in the 1780s. So the kilns, and this happened in the glass world as well, of course, and metalwork, they had to be regulated by the feel of the temperature on the foreman's cheek. And you just better hope he hadn't been to the tavern the night before.
That's amazing. There's two things actually I really want to mention, because I think they were the two sets that I really fell in love with, I suppose, is Royal. I've got expensive taste, Toms.
Yes, you have.
We've got Royal Lily.
You have.
We've got the Duke of Gloucester Tureens over here.
Yes, very expensive taste.
They are just so beautiful.
We'll go to the Duke of Gloucester service first, because those are earlier. We would date these to circa 1770. There isn't an absolute date when these were created. However, they were created for, in actual fact, the Duke of Gloucester. He had ordered a service with a very, very similar pattern. And I'm pointing at a series of very interestingly designed cartouches that appear as the border decoration, which are inhabited by large winged butterflies or moths. The other thing about them is that they have a series of very, very rarely depicted items of fruit and vegetable. For example, the mushrooms there with the underside gills. You hardly ever see that. And the quinces here, which you can see are beautifully spotted. You can almost smell them.
Yes. And of course, there's a globe artichoke handle.
Absolutely.
Of course, that's a very fashionable vegetable at the time.
It is. And of course, that's taken from an aspect of symbolism in metalwork, which goes all the way back to antiquity. It's known as a palm fruit originally, and it is literally a triumph. So again, it's the perfect thing to put atop these wonderfully large items. It's an absolute triumph. The majority of this service came down through the Duke, when the Duke of Gloucester died, came down through the Dukes of Cambridge until 1902, when it was sold at Christie's. However, there's a significant amount of it still at Windsor Castle, and it still gets used. And I've handled some of the pieces there. Yeah.
My untrained eye says that there's still a bit of silverware going on there.
Very much so, the gudruned edge. Yes. Absolutely, very much so. And also the twin handles of the stylized shells. Yeah.
But I suppose what they've moved away from now, rather than showing chinoiserie or what people might expect to find on chinoiserie, this is very English now.
Yes, it is. The original commission from Chelsea copied a service that was made for the Mecklenburg-Strelitz family. That's the family of the Queen of England, George III's Queen.
Right.
And so we get Englishness going over to Germany, which is rather wonderful. And you're absolutely right. This is full-blooded English natural Rococo, very much there and extremely successfully done.
Well, this is the period of time where people are growing melons, pineapples, all sorts in their huge country kitchen gardens. People think of these kitchen gardens as maybe some kind of little twee things that people...
No.
These places were huge.
They were on industrial scale, weren't they, literally?
They absolutely were.
To feed all the mouths, yes.
Yes, indeed. So it's fantastic to see. So when it comes to services... And listeners might be interested to know that they can buy pieces of this in the shop.
Yes, they can. Absolutely.
I thought I might have got a bit of a discount or something, but
well, I'm sure if you ask nicely,
employees discount. But yes, this set here, I feel like we have to talk about, because
we must.
I just think it's so beautiful.
Yeah. It's rather wonderful that it has simplicity and elegance equally entwined within it, doesn't it? It has the Chinese pattern. It's a floral lily pattern, if you like, first of all, that was created by the Chinese in the 18th century. Worcester has copied it, given it their own uniqueness and charm about it. We've still got a little of the silver shape and form with the ogival rims that we can see there, beautifully picked out in a sort of chocolate brown red colour. But absolutely, this is the first service that was ordered, in actual fact, by the Queen, and it comes from a very historic visit in 1788. John Flight was then in charge. He was one of the next partners in a different period, just outside the first period. But he was in his office, and his secretary came running into the office, saying, "Sir, you must come outside." And he said, "Look, I've told you once, I've told you 1,000 times today, do not disturb me." And the secretary then, according to John Flight's diary, which we have by gracious gift of the Flight family here in the museum.
Yeah, fantastic archives of the museum.
It's a wonderful, wonderful resource.
It really is, yes.
But the secretary then thought, well, I'm never going to get him out, actually grabbed his arm and pulled him outside. You can imagine a bit of a scuffle. But what met John Flight's eyes were the entire royal family standing in front of him. The King, the Queen, the Prince of Wales, the various royal dukes and duchesses, princesses. They were all there, and they were staying at the Bishop's Palace. But they kept the visit fairly secret. They knew that some of them were in town. However, for them to come to the manufactory at that stage, no one knew they were going to do that.
Just pop in.
Yeah, and they did. And John Flight took them around the manufactory, took them to show them the wares at various different stages. And this pattern caught the Queen's eye. John Flight, 10 days later, was asked to go to Windsor, and this was ordered. And thereby hangs the story of the royal warrant.
Yes.
And it's hugely important. And we can see there the little crescent moon in underglazed blue, but also gilded there underneath the crown. There it is. Now, is that the moon gilded, or is it the sea for Queen Charlotte? I think it might be.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's great about this service is when you first see it, you think it's beautiful and simple. This is what I thought. And then as I was getting you, obviously, I mean, it's the first time you walk in here, there's so much going on. You get a little bit dazzled.
You do. You've got to look at one or two pieces first, yes.
And it did stand out as something beautiful and simple. Then when I was going around again a bit more carefully, did I realise that it is not simple.
No. And if you make a mistake on that, you'll see it. It looks complicated when you get to it, but it has a simplicity, again, as you've just described. But if you get one thing out of place on that, you will really notice it. So the talents, particularly on this example of the cobalt painters, is incredible.
It's amazing. Some of the things that the museum's acquired, because it's not a large museum.
No, it's not, but it's a real jewel in the crown.
It really is.
Yes, it really is.
And yes, some of the collections here are astounding. And well, getting a chance to hear a little bit behind the scenes just really helps me appreciate them a whole lot more. You know, these first couple of decades in the life of Royal Worcester is just so, or of Worcester Porcelain, I should say, is just so fascinating.
They are enchanting years, magical for their brilliance and evolutionary qualities in terms of the pace and the technology required to manufacture some of the most beautiful things that have come out of this country in the 18th century.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Paul. Now, there's lots of links in the show notes, including several videos from the Museum of Royal Worcester YouTube channel, showing Paul handling and talking about some of the most important pieces, including that Wigonia cream jug, as well as a talk he gave as part of the museum's lecture series called Nature, Porcelain and the Enlightenment. I've also popped in the show notes links to the videos about the projects that I've done with the museum if you want to check those out too. And there's a link to the wonderful book that Paul described called The Natural History of Uncommon Birds by George Edwards. And I must say, it's really worth checking out the full interview on The Secret Podcast. Several top-notch darlings had to be killed in the editing of this episode. If you can support the podcast and blog financially, you can donate a one-off coffee or pint, or start up a monthly £3 subscription to receive access to The Secret Podcast. Go to BritishFoodHistory.com and click on the Support the Blog and Podcast tab, where you can find out about all of the benefits of being a subscriber. In the meantime, though, if you can, spare the time to leave a nice positive review on your favourite podcast app and rate the podcast with 5 stars, please. I would be most grateful. Don't forget, I want your material for the upcoming postbag edition of the podcast, so drop me an email if you like, neil@britishfoodhistory.com. The mixing and sound engineering for this episode was done by Thomas Tinas of the Delicious Legacy podcast, who has had a very good recent episode about Arctic explorers and the food they ate, a fascinating topic. But now it's time for me to go, so until next time, cheerio.